Good morning. Good morning. Oh my goodness. Y'all still sound okay. So yesterday, to what happened? Because I did not come on here yesterday. I did not come on here yesterday, and it is because hi, please, y'all wait because I don't be know who it is, and I can address you by name, or I could just say, you know what I'm saying, hey. But anyway, I was sick, y'all. I got sick 2 days ago. I put in some emergency in some hot water. I got sick like 2 days ago, and literally I was like my voice was worse than this, and I was like, I'm not getting up in front of people, even though there was nobody joining. I'm like, I'm not about to make a video sounding like that. Like I sound like a whole man. Plus, I already got a deeper voice anyway, so now I really sound bad. So I'm like, that's not what we're doing today. So that's why I didn't make a video. I haven't made a video for like 2 days, but it's okay because we're gonna make it up in the end. Whoa. I got my it looks nasty right now, but it's hot water and emergency. I got the raspberry boot and I got the tangerine. So I'm just gonna mix this up. I don't have a spoon, so glad it's off camera so y'all can't call me trifling. But yeah, that's what's been going on. Today might be like a quiet read. I'm sure my voice, I'm sure I'll sound a little bit better after like drinking that, but yeah. Anyway, let's jump into it. So Matthew 20, first Samuel 28 or 29 to 2 Samuel 12. Okay. First Samuel. Oh, did I read all the 29? I think I read 29. Okay, girl. Okay, perfect. I read 29. So we're gonna read 30 Samuel, 1 Samuel 30 to 2 Samuel 12. And we're on day 22. Day 22. 1 Samuel 30 to 2 Samuel 12. All right. Oh my gosh. Scarf's a little loose. I'm just going like this so then it can't slide off. All right, y'all. Y'all ready? Y'all are ready. Cool. Okay, so 30. Says David and his men reached Ziklag on the third day. Now the Amalekites had raided Negev and Ziklag. They attacked Ziklag and burned it and had taken captive the women who were in it, both young and old. They killed none of them, but carried them off as they went on their way. When David and his men came to Ziklag, they found it destroyed by fire and their wives and sons and daughters taken captive. So David and his men wept aloud until they had no strength to weep. David's two wives had been captured, Ahinoam and Jezreel, and Abigail, the widow of Nabal, at Carmel. David was greatly distressed because the men were talking of stoning him. Each one was bitter in spirit because his sons and daughters. But David found strength in the Lord his God. Then David said to Abiathar, the priest, the son of Ahimelech, "Bring me the ephod." And he brought it to him. And David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I pursue this raiding party? Will I overtake them?" "Pursue them," he said. "You will certainly overtake them and succeed in the rescue." David and the 600 men with him came to Bezor Ravine, where some stayed behind, for 200 men were too exhausted to cross the ravine. But David and 400 men continued on the pursuit. They found an Egyptian in the field and brought him to David. They gave him water and drink and food to eat, part of a cake of pressed figs and 2 cakes of raisins. He ate and was revived, for he had not eaten food or drunken any water for 3 days and 3 nights. David asked him, "To whom do you belong and where do you come from?" He said, "I am an Egyptian, the slave of Amalekite. My master abandoned me when I became ill 3 days ago. We raided the Negev of the Kerethites in the territory belonging to Judah and the Negev of Caleb, and we burned Ziklag." David asked him, "Can you lead me down to this raiding party?" He answered, "Swear to me before God that you will not kill me or hand me over to my master, and I will take you down to them." He led David down, and there they were scattered over the countryside, eating, drinking, and reveling because of the great amount of plunder that they had taken from the land of the Philistines and from Judah. David fought them from dusk until the evening of the next day, and none of them got away, except for 400 young men who rode off on camels and fled. David recovered everything the Amalekites had taken, including his 2 wives. Nothing was missing, young or old, boy or girl, plunder or anything else that they had been taken. David brought everything back. He took all the flocks and the herds. His men drove them ahead of the other livestock, saying, "This is David's plunder." Then David came to 200 men who had been too exhausted to follow him, where they left behind Nebazor Ravine. They came out to meet David and the people with him. David and his men approached and greeted him, but all the evil men and the troublemakers among David's followers said, "Because they did not go out with us, we will not share the plunder we recovered. However, each man take his wife and children and go." David replied, "No, my brothers, you must not do what the Lord has given. You must not do that with what the Lord has given us. He has protected us and handed over the forces that came against us. Who will listen to what you say? The share of the men who stay with the supplies is to be the same of what if he went down there in battle. All will share alike." David made this a statute and ordinance statute. An ordinance for Israel from that day on this. When David arrived in Ziklag, he sent some of the plunder to the elders of Judah who were his friends, saying, "Here's a present for you from the plunder of the Lord's enemies. Send it to those who are in Bethel, Ramoth, Negev, and Jatir, and those in Aroer, Ziphmah, Simo, and Rakal, to those in the towns of Jeremielites and the Kenites, and those who in Hormah, Borashan, Atach, and Hebron, and those in other places where David and his men have roamed." Now the Philistines fought against Israel. The Israelites fled before them, and many fell slain to Mount Gilboa. The Philistines pressed harder after Saul and his sons, and they killed his son Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua. The fighting grew fierce around Saul, and the archers overtook him. They wounded him critically. Saul said to his armor bearer, "Draw your sword and run me through, or these uncircumcised fellows will come and run through and abuse me." But his armor bearer was terrified and would not die. It would not do it. So Saul took his own sword and fell on it. Then the armor bearer saw that Saul was dead, and he fell on his sword and died. So Saul and his 3 sons and armor bearer and all his men died together that same day. When the Israelites along the valley and across the Jordan saw that the Israelite army had fled and Saul and his sons died, they abandoned their towns and fled. The Philistines came and occupied them. The next day, when the Philistines came to strip the dead, they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen on Mount Gilboa. They cut off his head and stripped off his armor, and they sent messengers throughout the land of the Philistines to proclaim the news in the temple of their idols and among their people. They put his armor in the temple of the Ashereths and fastened his body to the wall of Bethshan. When the people of Jabesh Gilead heard of what the Philistines had done to Saul, all of their valiant men journeyed through the night to Bethshan. They took down the bodies of Saul and his sons from the wall of Bethshan and went to Jabesh, where they burned them. Then they took their burns and buried them under a tamarisk tree at Jabesh, and they fasted for 7 days. So that is all of 1 Samuel. That's all of 1 Samuel. I'm going to go back. Yeah, that's all of 1 Samuel. I'm going to put the marker to where we gotta read to. Okay. 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 So we finished at page 429. We're at page 410. All right. 411. So let's get it. So it says, David hears of Saul's death. After the death of Saul, David returned from defeating the Amalekites and stayed in Ziklag 2 days. On the third day, a man arrived from Saul's camp where his clothes were torn and dust on his head. When he came to David, he fell to the ground and to pay him honor. Where have you come from? David asked. He answered, I escaped from the Israelite camp. What happened? David said, tell me. The men fled from the battle. Many of them fell and died, and Saul and his son Jonathan are dead. Then David said to the young man who brought him the report, how do you know that Saul and his son Jonathan are dead? I happened to be on Mount Gilboa, the young man said. There was Saul leaning on his spear with his chariots and riders among him. When he turned around and saw me, he called out, what can I do? He asked me, who are you? I said, an Amalekite. Then he said to me, stand over me and kill me. I am in the throes of death, but I'm still alive. So I stood over him and killed him because I knew that after he'd fallen, he could not survive. And I took the crown that was on his head and the band on his arm and have them brought here to my Lord. Then David and all the men with him took hold of their clothes and tore them. They mourned and wept and fasted till evening for Saul and his son Jonathan, and for the army of the Lord in the house of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. David said to the young man who brought him the report, where are you from? He said, I am the son of an alien Amalekite, he answered. He said, why were you not afraid to lift your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed? Then David called down his men and said, go strike him down. So he struck him down, and he died. For David said to him, your blood will be on your own head. Your own mouth testified against you when you said, I killed the Lord's anointed. David took up the lament concerning Saul and his son Jonathan and ordered that the men of Judah be taught this lament of the bow. It is written, your glory, O Lord, O Israel, lies slain on your heights. How the mighty have fallen. Tell it not in Gath, proclaim it not in the streets of Ashkelon, lest the daughters of the Philistines be glad, lest the daughters of the uncircumcised rejoice. On Mount Gilboa may you neither dew nor rain nor fields that yield offering of grain. For there is a shield of the mighty who is defiled, a shield of Saul no longer rubbed with oil. From the blood of the slain, from the flesh of the mighty, of the bow, Jonathan did not turn back. The sword of Saul did not return unsatisfied. Saul and Jonathan in the life they were loved and gracious, and in death they were not parted. They were swifter than eagles. They were stronger than lions. O daughters of Israel, weep for Saul, who clothed you in scarlet and finery, who adored your garments with the ornaments of gold. How the mighty have fallen in battle. Jonathan lies slain on your heights. I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. You were very dear to me. Your love for me was wonderful, more wonderful than of a woman. How the mighty have fallen, the weapons of war have perished. So, if you're not understanding what happened, so basically, this alien of Amalekite, he saw that Saul was dying, and Saul was like, kill me because I'm already wounded and I don't want them to come kill me. And so he killed him. And then David killed him because he killed the Lord's anointed. Boom. Number 2. So it says, in the course of time, David inquired of the Lord, shall I go up to one of the towns of Judah? He said. The Lord said, go up. David asked, where shall I go? To Hebron, the Lord answered. So David went up there with his 2 wives, Ahinoam and Jezreel, and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. Ahinoam of Jezreel, not and Jezreel, sorry. Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. David also took men who were with him, each with his family, and they settled in Hebron and its towns. Then the men of Judah came to Hebron, where they anointed David king over the house of Judah. When David was told it was of the men of Jabesh Gilead who buried Saul, he sent messengers to the men of Jabesh Gilead to say to them, so the Lord bless you for showing this kindness to Saul, your master, by burying him. May the Lord now show you kindness and faithfulness, and I too will show you the same favor because you have done this. Now then, be strong and be brave, for Saul, your master, is dead, and the house of Judah has anointed me the king over them. War between the houses of David and Saul. Meanwhile, Abner, son of Ner, the commander of Saul's army, had taken Ishbosheth, son of Saul, and brought him over to Mahanaim. He made him king over Gilead, Ashuri, and Jezreel over Ephraim, Benjamin, and all of Israel. Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, was 40 years old when he became king over Israel, and he reigned 2 years. The house of Judah, however, followed David. The length of time David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months. Abner, son of Ner, together with the men of Ishbosheth, son of Saul, left Mahanaim and went to Gibeon. Joab, the son of Zeruiah, and David's men went out to meet them at the pool of Gibeon. One group sat down on one side of the pool, and the other group sat on the other. Then Abner said to Joab, "Let's have some of the young men get up and fight hand to hand in front of us." "Okay, let's do it." So they stood up, and they were counted off, 12 men from Benjamin and Ishbosheth, son of Saul, and 12 for David. Then each of them grabbed their opponent by the head and thrust a dagger into his opposite opponent's side, and they fell down together. So that place in Gibeon was called Helka Hazarim. The battle that day was very fierce, and Abner and the men of Israel were defeated by David's men. The three sons of Zeruiah were there: Joab, Abishi, and Asahel. Now he was fleet-footed like a wild gazelle. He chased Abner, turning neither right nor left as he pursued them. Abner looked behind him and said, "Is that you, Ashel?" He said, "It is." Then Abner said to him, "Turn aside to the right, to the left, take one of the young men and strip him of his weapons." But he would not stop chasing him. Again, Abner warned him, "Stop chasing me. Why should I strike you down? How could I look your brother Joab in the face?" But he refused to give up the pursuit. So Abner thrust the butt of his spear into his stomach, and the spear came out through his back. He fell there and died on the spot, and every man stopped what he did in that place where Asahel had fallen and died. But Joab and Abishi pursued Abner as the sun was setting, and they came to the hill of Ammon near Giah on the way to the wasteland of Gibeon. Then the people of Benjamin rallied behind Abner. They formed themselves a group and took their stand on the top of a hill. Abner called out to Joab, "Must this war devour forever? Don't you realize that this will end in bitterness? How long before you order your men to stop pursuing their brothers?" Um, he answered, "As surely as God lives, you have not spoken." The men would continue the pursuit of their brothers until morning. So Joab blew the trumpet, and all the men came to a halt, and they no longer pursued Israel, nor did they fight anymore. All that night, Abner and his men marched through Arabah, and they crossed the Jordan and continued the whole Bithron and came to Mahanaim. Then Joab returned from pursuing Abner and assembled all his men. Besides Asahel, 19 of David's men were found missing, but David's men had killed 360 Benjamites who were with Abner. They took Asahel and buried him in his father's tomb at Bethlehem. Then Joab and his men marched all night in at Hebron at daybreak. The war between the house of Saul and the house of David lasted a long time. David grew stronger and stronger while the house of Saul grew weaker and weaker. Sons were born to David in Hebron. His first son was Amnon, the son of Ahinoam of Jezreel. His second was Kiliab, the son of Abigail. The third was Absalom, the son of Michal, daughter of Talmi, king of Jeshur. The fourth was Adonijah, the son of Haggith. The fifth was Zephatiah, the son of Abidal. And the sixth was Ephraim, the son of David's wife, Eglah. These were born to David in Hebron, so he must have had more wives or something. Okay, so this next part is called Abner Goes Over to David. I'm going to read that in my head. So basically, Saul's son was like, "Why don't you sleep with my father's concubine to Abner?" And Abner was like, "What?" and got offended, and then said to David's people, "I'll help, um, I'll help deliver Israel to you." So now we're at 22. Says Joab murders Abner. Then David's men and Joab returned from the raid and brought with them a great deal of plunder. But Abner was no longer with David in Hebron because David had sent him away and he had gone in peace. When Joab and all the soldiers arrived, he was told that Abner son of Ner came to the king, and the king had sent him away and that he had gone in peace. So Joab went to the king and said, "What have you done? Look, Abner came to you. Why did you let him go? Now he is gone. You know, son of Abner, he came to deceive you and observe your movements and found out everything you're doing." Joab then left David and sent messengers after Abner and brought him back from the well of Syria. But David did not know of it. Now, when Abner returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside to the gateway as though to speak with him privately, and there to avenge the brother of his brother Asahel, Joab stabbed him in the stomach and he died. Later, when David heard about this, he said, "I and my kingdom are forever innocent before the Lord concerning the blood of Abner, son of Ner. May his blood fall upon the head of Joab and upon his father's house. May Joab's house never be without someone who has had a running sore, leprosy, or who leans on a crutch, or who falls by a sword, or who lacks food." Um, then David said to Joab and all the people with him, "Tear your clothes and put on sackcloth and walk in mourning in front of Abner." Then King David himself walked behind the bier. They they buried Abner in Hebron, and the king wept aloud at Abner's tomb. All the people wept as well. The king sang this lament for Abner: "Should Abner have died as the lawless die? Your hands were not bound, your feet were not fettered. You fell as one falls before wicked men." And all the people wept over him again. Then they came and urged David to eat something while it was still day. But David took an oath, saying, "May God deal with me, be it ever so rarely, if I taste bread or anything before the sun sets." All the people took note and were pleased indeed. Everything that the king did pleased them. So on that day, the people and all Israel knew that the king had no part in the murder of Abner, the son of Ner. Then the king said to his men, "Do you not realize that as a prince and as a great man has fallen in Israel this day? And today, though I am anointed king, I am weak, and these sons of Zeruiah are too strong for me. May the Lord repay the evildoer according to his evil deeds." Ishbosheth murder. So this is chapter 4. When Ishbosheth, son of Saul, heard that Abner had died in Hebron, he lost courage, and all Israel became alarmed. Now Israel's son had two men who were leaders of raiding bands. One was Bana, and the other was Rechab. They were sons of Ramon at Beeroth, the Beerothite, from the tribe of Benjamin. Beeroth is considered the part of Benjamin because the people of Beeroth fled to Jittim and lived there as aliens to this day. Um, Now Rechab and Ben. Okay, I'm gonna read you this part. It says Jonathan, son of Saul, had a son who became lame in both feet. He was 5 years old when the news about Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel. His nurse picked him up and fled, but she heard to leave. He fell and became crippled. His name was Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth. Now Rechab and Bana, the sons of Ramon the Beerothite, set out for the house of Ishbosheth, and they arrived there in the heat of the day while he was taking his noonday rest. They went to the inner part of the house and got some wheat, and they stabbed him in the stomach. Then Rechab and his brother Bana slipped away. They had gone into the house while he was lying on his bed in the bedroom. After they stabbed him and killed him, they cut off his head. Taking it with them, they traveled all night all to the place of Arabah. They brought the head of him to David at Hebron and said, "Here's the head of Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, your enemy who tried to take your life. This day the Lord has avenged my lord the king against Saul and his offspring." David answered Rechab and his brother Bana, the sons of Ramon the Betherite, "As surely as the Lord lives, who has delivered me out of trouble, when a man told me Saul is dead and thought he was bringing me good news, I seized him and put him to death at Ziklag. That was the reward I gave him for his news. How much more than wicked man has killed an innocent man in his own house, in his own bed? Should I not demand his blood from your head and rid the earth of you? So David gave an order to his men and killed them. They cut off their heads and feet and hung the bodies in the pool of Hebron. But they took the head of Ishbosheth and buried it in Abner's tomb at Hebron. So if you're not understanding what happened there, so Saul's son, that was Ishbosheth, he lost faith when he heard that Abner was killed. So he lost faith. So the two people that he put over the raiding groups, these were the, soldier people, they went to his house and killed him. And then they brought the head to David, and they were bringing him good news. And then David still had them killed. Then it says, David becomes king over Israel. All the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and said, We are your own flesh and blood. In the past, while Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel on their military campaigns. And the Lord said to you, You will shepherd my people, Israel, and you will become their ruler. When all the elders of Israel had come to King David at Hebron, the king made a compact with them at Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. David was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned 40 years. In Hebron, he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months. And in Jerusalem, he reigned over all Israel and Judah 33 years. The Jebusites said to David, You will not get in here. Even the blind and lame can ward you off. They thought David cannot get in here. Nevertheless, David captured the fortress of Zion, the city of David. On that day, David said, Anyone who conquers the Jebusites will have to use the water shaft to reach those lame and blind who are David's enemies. That's why they say the blind and lame will not enter the palace. David then took up the residence of the fortress and called it the city of David. He built up an area around it for supporting terraces. Inward, he became more and more powerful because the Lord God Almighty was with him. Now Hiram, king of Tyre, sent messengers to David along with cedar logs and carpenters and stonemasons, and they built a palace for David. And David knew that the Lord had established him as king over Israel and had exalted his kingdom for the sake of his people of Israel. After he left Hebron, David took more concubines and wives in Jerusalem, and more sons and daughters were born to him. These are the names of the children born to him. Shemua, Shoab, Nathan, Solomon, Ibhar, Elishua, Jepheg, Japhia, Elishama, Eliada, and Eliphelet. David defeats the Philistines. When the Philistines heard that David had been anointed king over Israel, they went up in full force to search for him. But David heard about it and went down to the stronghold. Now the Philistines had come and spread on the valley of Rephaim. So David inquired the Lord, Shall I go and attack the Philistines? Will you hand them over to me? The Lord answered, Go, for I will surely hand the Philistines over to you. So David went to Baal-perazim, and there he defeated them. And he said, As waters break out, the Lord has broken out against my enemies before me. So the place was called Baal-perazim. I go to, where is that? Perazim means the Lord who breaks out. I literally go to a church called Perazim. Period. Where are we? Okay, so the place was called the Philistines abandoned their idols there, and David and his men carried them off. Once more, the Philistines came upon the spread of the valley of Rephaim, and so David inquired of the Lord, and he answered, Do not go straight up, but circle around behind them and attack them in front of the balsam trees. As soon as you hear the sound of marching in the top of the balsam trees, move quickly, because that will mean the Lord has gone out in front of you to strike the Philistine army. So David did as the Lord commanded him, and he struck down the Philistines all the way from Gibeon to Jezer. Number 6, David again brought together out of Israel, chose men 30,000 in all. He and his men set out from Baal to Judah to bring up from there the ark of God, who was called by the name of the Lord Almighty, who was enthroned between the cherubim that are on the ark. They set an ark of God on a new cart and brought it from the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. Uzzah and Ahio, Ahio, I don't know, sons of Abinadab were guiding the new car with the ark of God on it, and Ahio was walking in front of it. David and the whole house of Israel were celebrating with all their might before the Lord with songs and with harps and lyres and tambourines and sistrums and cymbals. When they came to the threshing floor of Nacon, Uzzah reached out and took hold of the Ark of the Covenant because an oxen stumbled. The Lord's anger burned against Uzzah because of his irreverent act. Therefore God struck him down, and he died there beside the ark of God. Then David was angry because the Lord's wrath had broken out against Uzzah, and that day is called Perez Uzzah. David was afraid of the Lord that day and asked, "How can the ark of God ever come to me?" He was not willing to take of the ark to be with him in the city of David. Instead, he took it inside the house of Obed the Gittite. The ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom, the Gittite, for 3 months, and the Lord blessed him and his entire household. Now David was told, "The Lord has blessed the entire household of Obed-Edom and everything that he has because of the ark of God." Then David went down and brought it from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David, rejoicing. When those who were carrying the ark of the Lord had taken 6 steps, he sacrificed a bull and a fattened calf. David, wearing a linen ephod, danced before the Lord with all his might, while he and the entire house of Israel brought the ark of the Lord with shouts and sounds of trumpets. As the ark of the Lord was entering the city of David, Michal, son of Saul, watched from the window. When she saw the king of David leaping and dancing before the Lord, she despised him in her heart. So Michal is the daughter of Saul. They brought the ark of the Lord and set it in its place inside the tent that David had pitched for it. And David sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings before the Lord. After he finished sacrificing the burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord Almighty. Then he gave a loaf of bread and a cake of dates and a cake of raisins to each person, the whole crowd of Israel, both men and women, and all the people went to their homes. When David returned from home to bless his household, Michal's daughter Saul came out to meet him and said, "Oh, the king of Israel has distinguished himself today, disrobing in the sight of the slave girls of his servants as any vulgar fellow would." David said to Michal, "It was before the Lord who chose me rather than your father or anyone in his house when he appointed me the ruler over the Lord's people of Israel. I will celebrate before the Lord. I will become even more undignified than this, and I will be humiliated in my own eyes. But by these slave girls that you spoke of, I will be held in honor." And Michal, daughter of Saul, had no children to the day of her death. Because period, mind your business. So basically, she was mad because David was dancing. And he was like, "I don't care. And I'm gonna keep dancing." And that's why she had no kids. Because she was over here doing too much. Okay. Number 7. So it says, after the king settled in his palace and the Lord had given him rest. Y'all, I'm really pushing through. After the king was settled in his palace and the Lord had given him rest from all of his enemies around him, he said to Nathan the prophet, "Here I am living in a palace of cedar while the ark of God remains in a tent." Nathan replied to the king, "Whatever you have in mind, go ahead and do it, for the Lord is with you." That night, the word of the Lord came to Nathan, saying, "Go and tell my servant, this is what the Lord says. Are you the one to build me a house to dwell in it? I have not built in a house from the day I brought the Israelites out of Egypt to this day. I have been moving from place to place with the tent as my dwelling. Wherever I have moved with the Israelites, and did I ever say to the rulers who I commanded, 'Why have you not built me a house of cedar?' Now then, tell my servant David, this is what the Lord Almighty says. I took you from the pasture, from the following flock, to be a ruler over my people of Israel. I have been with you wherever you have gone, and I have cut off all your enemies from before you. Now I will make your name great like the names of the greatest men of earth. And I will provide a place for my people of Israel and will plant them so they can have a home of their own and no longer be disturbed. Wicked men will not oppress them anymore as they did at the beginning and have done ever since the time that I appointed leaders over my people Israel. I will give you rest from all your enemies. The Lord declares to you that the Lord himself will establish a house for you. When your days are over and you rest with your fathers, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, who will come from your own body, and I will establish his kingdom. He is the one He is the one who will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he will be my son. When he does wrong, I will punish him with the rod of men by flogging inflicted by men. But my love will never be taken away from him, as I took it away from Saul, whom I removed before you. Your household and your kingdom will endure forever before me. Your throne will be established forever. Nathan reported this to David, the words of his entire revelation. I'm going to read David's prayer up until chapter 8 in my head. Okay, so chapter 8, David's victories. In the course of time, David defeated the Philistines and subdued them, and he took Metheg Hamath from the control of the Philistines. David also defeated the Moabites. He made them lie down on the ground and measured them off with the length of a cord. Every 2 lengths they were put to death, and the third length was allowed to live. So the Moabites became subject to David and brought to tribute. Moreover, David fought Hadadezer, the son of Rehob, king of Zobah. Then he went to restore his control along the Euphrates River. David captured 1,000 of his chariots and 7,000 charioteers and 20,000 foot soldiers. He hamstrung all but 100 of the chariot horses. When the Arameans of Damascus came to help Hadadezer, the king of Zobah, David struck down 22,000 of them. He put garrisons in the Aramean kingdom of Damascus, and the Arameans became subject to him and brought tribute. The Lord gave David victories wherever he went. David took the gold shields that belonged to the officers of Hadadezer, and brought them to Jerusalem. From Taba to Berothe, towns that belonged to Hadadezer, King David took a great quantity of bronze. When King of Hamath heard of David had defeated the entire army of Hadadezer, he sent his son Joram, the king of David, to greet him and congratulate him on the victories and battle over Hadadezer, who had been at war with two. Joram brought him articles of silver, of gold, and bronze. King David dedicated these articles to the Lord as he done with the silver and the gold from all the nations he subdued. Edom and Moab, the Amorites, and the Philistines, and Amalek. He also dedicated the plunder from Hadadezer to Rehob, the king of Zobah. Rehob, king of Zobah. And David became famous after he returned the striking down of 18,000 Edomites in the valley of Saul. He put garrisons through Edom, and all the Edomites became subject to David. The Lord gave victory to David wherever he went. David reigned over all Israel, doing what was right and just for all the people. Joab, son of Zeruiah, was over the army. Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud, was recorder. Zadok, son of Ahitub of Ahimelech, son of Abiathar, were priest. Sariah was the secretary. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, was the Kezethites, and Pelethites, and David's sons were loyal advisors. I'm going to read chapter 9 in my head. Boom. So it's called David and Mephibosheth. So this was Jonathan's son, and remember, Jonathan's son was crippled in both feet because um, his nurse dropped him when they found out the news. We read that already. When they found out the news, so he was crippled in both feet. So then David was like, "Who can I bless from Saul's family? Who's left in Saul's family that I can bless?" And he came and he said, "This is who you can bless. He's crippled both feet." And then he said, "You can always eat with me, and people are going to work in the fields for you." Boom. Number 10. David defeats the Ammonites. In the course of time, the king of the Ammonites died, and his son Hanun succeeded him as king. David thought, "I will show kindness to Hanun, son of Nahash, uh, just as his father showed kindness to me." So David sent. So David sent. So David. So David sent delegation to express his sympathy to Hanun concerning his father. When David's men came to the land of Ammonites, the Ammonites nobles said to Hanun, their lord, "Do you think David is honoring your father by sending men to you to express sympathy? Hasn't David sent them to you to explore the city and spy it out and overthrow it?" So Hanun seized David's people and shaved off half of each man's beard and cut off their garments in the middle of the buttocks and sent them away. When David was told about this, he sent the messengers to meet the men, for they were greatly humiliated. The king said, "Stay at Jericho till your beards have grown, and then come back." When the Ammonites realized that they had become a stench in David's nostrils, they hired 20,000 Aramean foot soldiers from Beth Rehob and Zobah, as well as the king of Makkah with 1,000 men, who were also 12 men from Tob. On hearing this, David sent out Joab with the entire army of fighting men. The Ammonites came out and drew up a battle formation at the entrance of their city gate, while the Armenians of Zoah and Rehob, of the men of Tob and Makkah, were there themselves in the open country. Joab saw that there was a battle lines in front of them and behind them, so he selected some of the best troops in Israel and deployed them against the Arameans. He put the rest of the men under the command of Abishai, his brother, and deployed them against the Ammonites. Joab said, "If the Arameans are too strong for me, then they will come to my rescue. But if the Ammonites are too strong for you, then I will come to your rescue. Be strong and let us fight bravely for our people in the cities of our God. The Lord will do what is good in his sight." Then Joab and the troops with him advanced to fight the Arameans. They fled before him. When the Ammonites saw that their Arameans were fleeing, they fled before the Abishai and went inside the city. So Joab returned from fighting from the Ammonites and came to Jerusalem. After the Arameans saw that they had been routed by Israel, they regrouped. Hadadezer and the Arameans brought from behind the river. They went to Helam and Shobak, and the commander of Hadadezer's army leading them. When David was told of this, he gathered all of Israel, crossed the Jordan, and went to Helam. The Arameans formed their battle lines to meet David and fought against him, but they fled before Israel, and David killed 700 of their charioteers and 40,000 of their foot soldiers. He also struck down Shobak, the commander of their army, and he died there. When all the kings who were vassals of Hadadezer saw that he had been defeated by Israel, they made peace with the Israelites, and all of them came subject to them. So the Arameans were afraid to help the Ammonites anymore. David and Bathsheba. Okay, we're almost there, y'all. In the spring, at the time when the kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. They destroyed the Ammonites, and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem. One evening, David got up from his bed and walked to the roof of his palace. From the roof, he saw a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful, and David sent someone to find out about her. The man said, "Isn't this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, and the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" Then David sent the messengers to get her. She came to him, and he slept with her. Then she went back home, and the woman conceived and sent word to David that she was pregnant. So David sent his room to Joab, send me the Uriah the Hittite. So Joab sent him to David, and Uriah came to him. David asked him about Joab and how the soldiers were and how the war was going. Then David said to Uriah, "Go down to your house and wash your feet." So Uriah left the place, and as a gift from the king was sent after him. But Uriah slept at the entrance to the palace with all his master's servants and did not go to his house. When David was told Uriah did not go home, he asked, "Haven't you just come from a great distance? Why don't you go home?" He said to David, the ark and Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my master Joab and my Lord's men are camped in the open fields. How can I go home and eat with my wife and eat and drink and lie with my wife? As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing. Then David said to him, "Stay here one more day, and tomorrow I will send you back." So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next day. At David's invitation, he ate and drank with him, and David made him drunk. But in the evening, Uriah went out to sleep on his mat along his master's servants, and he did not go home. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and put it with Uriah. In it, he wrote, "Put Uriah in the front of the line where the fighting is the fiercest, then withdraw from him so he will be struck down and die." So while Joab was in the city, had the city under siege, he put Uriah at the place where he knew the strongest defenders were. When the men of the city came out and fought against Joab, some of the men of David's army fell. Moreover, Uriah the Hittite had died. Joab had sent David a full account of the battle. He instructed the messenger, "When you have finished giving king the account of the battle, the king's anger may flare, but he will ask you, 'Why did you get so close to the city to fight? Don't you know they would shoot arrows from the wall? Who killed Abimelech, son of Jerub Beshed? Didn't a woman throw a milestone from the wall so he died in the beds? Why did you get so close? Also say to him, also your servant Uriah the Hittite has died." The messenger sent out, and when he arrived and told David everything Joab had sent him to say, the messenger said to David, "The men overpowered us and came out against us in the open, but we drove them back to the entrance of the city gate. When the archers shot arrows at your servant from the wall, some of the men died. Moreover, your servant Uriah the Hittite has died." David told the messenger, "Say this to Joab, and don't let this upset you. The sword devours one as well as another. Press the attack against the city and destroy it. Say this to encourage Joab." When Uriah's wife heard that her husband was dead, she mourned for him. After the time of mourning was over, David had her brought to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. But the thing that David did displeased the Lord. Okay, last chapter, y'all. Whew. Okay, so Nathan rebukes David. The Lord sent Nathan to David. When he came to him, he said, "There were two men in a certain town, one rich and one poor. The rich had a very large number of sheep and cattle, but the poor had nothing except for one ewe lamb that he bought. He raised it, and he grew up with him and his children, and shared his food and drank from his cup, and even slept in his arms. It was like a daughter to him. Now a traveler came to the rich man, but the rich man refrained from taking one of his own sheep or cattle to prepare a meal for the traveler who come with him. Instead, he took the ewe lamb that belonged to the poor man and prepared for the one who came to him." David burned with anger against the man and said to Nathan, "As surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this deserves to die. He must pay for the lamb 4 times over because he did such a thing and had no pity." Then Nathan said to David, "You are this man. This is what the Lord God of Israel has says. I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you from the hand of Saul, and I gave your master's house to you and your master's wives into your arms. I gave you the house of Israel and Judah. And if this had been too little, I would have given you even more. Why did you despise the word of the Lord by doing what is evil in his eyes? You struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword and took his wife to be your own. You killed him with the sword of the Ammonites. Now, therefore, the sword will never depart from your house because you despised me and took the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your own. This is what the Lord says. Out of your own household, I'm going to bring calamity upon you. Before your eyes, I will take your wives and give them to someone who is close to you, and he will lie with your wives in broad daylight. You did it in secret, but I will do this thing in broad daylight before all Israel." Then David said to Nathan, "I have sinned against the Lord." Nathan replied, "The Lord has taken away your sin, but you are not going to die. But because by doing this you have made enemies of the Lord to show utter contempt, the son born to you will die." After Nathan had gone home, the Lord struck the child that Uriah's wife had born to David, and he became ill. David pleaded with the God for the child. He fasted and went into his house and spent the nights lying on the ground. The elders of his household stood beside him to get up from the ground, but he refused and would not eat any food with them. On the seventh day, the child died. David's servants were all afraid to tell them the child was dead, for they thought, when the child is still living, we spoke to David, but he would not listen to us. How will we tell him the child is dead? He may do something desperate. David noticed that his servants were whispering amongst them, and he realized that the child was dead. Is the child dead? He asked. Yes, they said he is dead. Then David got up from the ground after he had washed and put on lotions and changed his clothes. He went into the house of the Lord and worshiped. Then he went to his own house at his request, and they served him food, and he ate. His servants asked, Why are you acting this way? While the child was alive, you fasted and wept, but now that the child is dead, you get up and eat? He answered, While the child was still alive, I fasted and wept. I thought, Who will let the child live? Oh, who knows? The Lord may be gracious to me and let the child live. But now that he is dead, why should I fast? Can I bring him back again? I will go to him, but he will not return to me. Then David comforted his wife Bathsheba, and he went to her and lay with her. She gave birth to a son, and they named him Solomon. The Lord loved him because the Lord loved him, and because the Lord loved him, he sent word through Nathan the prophet to name him Jedediah. Meanwhile, Joab fought against Rabbah of the Ammonites and captured the royal cities. The royal citadel. I don't know. Joab had messengers sent to David saying, I have fought against Rabbah and taken its water supply. Now muster the rest of the troops and besiege the city and capture it. Otherwise, I'll take the city and it will be named after me. So David mustered the entire army and went to Rabbah and attacked and captured it. He took crown from the head of their king, and its weight was a talent of gold, and it was set with precious stones and was placed on David's head. He took a great quantity of plunder from the city and brought out the people who were there, co-signing them with labors and saws and iron picks and axes, and he made work at brick making. He did this to the Ammonite towns. Then David and his entire army returned to Jerusalem. All right, y'all. That was reading for today. I'm glad it was under an hour. I'm going to take some notes after I end this. Thank you so much for watching. I hope my voice sounds a little bit different later tonight. And I'll see you later.